The selfish-selflessness paradox. There's a strange truth most people never realize until life forces them into it. Sometimes the quickest way to feel whole is to give a piece of yourself away. You think your happiness is locked inside the walls of your own dreams, your own goals, your own comfort. You think fulfillment comes from protecting your time, your energy, your resources like a fortress. You work, you save, you chase the vision of a life where you have enough before you can give. But then a moment comes, maybe small, maybe sudden, where someone else's need stares you in the face. You hesitate. Part of you wants to turn away to protect your own reserves. And yet, against all logic, you step forward. You give. And instead of feeling drained, you feel full. That is the paradox, the selfish selflessness. The more you pour into others, the more your own cup mysteriously overflows. It doesn't make sense to a world obsessed with self-preservation. We're told, look out for number one, you can't pour from an empty cup. But what no one mentions is that sometimes filling someone else's cup is exactly what refills your own. Think back to a time you truly helped. Not for praise, not for recognition, but simply because you could. Maybe it was staying up late to listen to someone who was falling apart. Maybe it was giving away money you knew you'd miss. Maybe it was standing beside someone in silence because they had no words left. The warm pulse in your chest afterwards wasn't an accident. It was your humanity waking up, your brain rewarding you with endorphins and dopamine, connecting you to a sense of meaning that possessions or status never touch. Science confirms what the soul already knows. Giving is wired into us as a source of joy, a quiet medicine for the emptiness we often carry. But here's the catch. The magic only works when it's genuine. Help given for applause feels hollow. It fades like a spark in the rain. The world can sense when your kindness is just a performance. Real selflessness is raw. It costs you something. Time you didn't have, energy you could have spent elsewhere, money you weren't sure you could spare. And yet somehow, it leaves you richer. Because giving is not about loss. It's about expansion. You step into someone's storm for a moment, and in doing so you remember you're part of something bigger than yourself. And that realization lingers long after the act is done. Still, the paradox raises a haunting question. Are we ever truly selfless if the act of helping makes us feel good? Does the personal reward make it selfish? Maybe the answer isn't black and white. Maybe selfishness and selflessness aren't enemies at all, but partners in a loop, one feeding the other. By helping others, we help ourselves. By healing others, we heal ourselves. The act is one, the benefit is twofold. Perhaps the real wisdom is in accepting this truth instead of running from it. So the lesson is not to abandon your needs, nor to martyr yourself for the world. It's to embrace the balance, to tend to your own growth while staying open to the needs of those around you. Because when you step outside your own shadow, you don't just light someone else's path, you end up walking into a brighter world yourself. In the end, the selfish selflessness paradox isn't a trick of morality, it's a quiet law of life, whispering that the most valuable things you'll ever give away are the very things that will come back to you multiplied. You don't lose yourself in giving, you find yourself there. And maybe that's the most selfish thing of all, to realize that in serving others, you're building a version of yourself you could never create by living only for you. The consciousness paradox. Close your eyes for a moment. Listen to the hum of your own thoughts, the flicker of images, the echo of memories, the subtle rise and fall of emotions you can't quite name. Now open them again. The world floods back, colors, shapes, movement, sounds. And yet you're not just seeing it, you're aware that you're seeing it. You're not just thinking, you're aware that you're thinking. This invisible witness inside you, this strange inner presence, is what we call consciousness. It's so intimate, so constant, that we never question it. But the moment we do, we stumble into one of the most profound riddles in existence. How can something made of physical matter, neurons, chemicals, and electricity, give rise to something as immaterial and mysterious as awareness? That's the consciousness paradox, the unsettling truth that the thing you use to understand everything else may be the one thing you can never fully understand. From one perspective, the brain is just a machine, 3 pounds of tissue, a web of billions of neurons firing in patterns dictated by biology and shaped by experience. And yet that machine somehow produces the vivid, subjective experience of you. You can dissect a brain, examine every fold and pathway, trace every electrical signal, and still never find the taste of chocolate, the ache of heartbreak, or the awe of a sunset. The physical world and the felt experience seem like two entirely different realities, yet they are inseparably linked. Science can explain the mechanics of thought, but the feeling of thought, the what it's like to be you, it remains beyond its grasp. Some scientists argue that consciousness is nothing more than a byproduct of complex brain activity, an illusion your brain creates, like a shadow cast by the machinery of thought. Others suggest it's something more fundamental, a property of the universe itself, like space and time, that the brain merely taps into. Either way, we face the same wall. We are trying to use consciousness to understand consciousness, like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. Every theory feels incomplete because the mystery isn't just academic, it's personal. The paradox deepens when you consider how much your consciousness shapes reality. You don't just see the world, you interpret it. Two people can stand in the same room, hear the same words, watch the same scene, and walk away with entirely different experiences. Consciousness filters reality through the lens of your memories, your emotions, your beliefs. The world you live in is not the raw world, it's the one your mind has built for you. And yet, your mind is also part of the same physical reality it interprets. The observer and the observed are tangled in the same loop, inseparable. This paradox forces us to confront uncomfortable possibilities. If consciousness is purely the result of physical processes, are we just complex biological machines with every decision and desire determined by cause and effect? Does free will truly exist, or is it just the sensation of choice created by the brain? On the other hand, if consciousness is something greater, something not fully contained in the physical, then who or what are you really? Could you be more than the sum of your parts? Even the most brilliant minds admit the limits of their understanding here. Neuroscientists can map the entire architecture of the brain and still say, we don't know why awareness exists at all. Philosophers have debated it for centuries, from Descartes' I think, therefore I am, to modern theories about panpsychism, the idea that consciousness might be woven into the fabric of the universe. But perhaps the consciousness paradox isn't meant to be solved. Perhaps its purpose is to remind us of the wonder of simply being. Because at the end of the day, you don't need to fully understand consciousness to experience it. You are living it every second, in the warmth of the sun on your face, in the bittersweet sting of nostalgia, in the quiet comfort of knowing you exist. And maybe that's the real gift of the paradox. It forces you to stop chasing the answer long enough to feel the miracle of the question. You are both the mystery and the witness to it. And in that awareness lies a kind of beauty that no equation or theory could ever capture. The free will paradox. Picture this. You're standing in line at a cafe, scanning the menu. Your eyes drift between two choices, a latte or a cappuccino. You weigh your mood, imagine the taste, consider the texture of the foam. Finally, you say, latte, please. It feels like a small, ordinary moment of pure freedom, a choice you made because you wanted to. But then, in the quiet after, a thought slips in. Was it really my choice? That's when you step into one of the most unsettling riddles of human existence, the free will paradox. If every decision you make is shaped by forces outside your control, your genetics, your upbringing, your environment, the structure of your brain, are you truly free? Or are you just a passenger watching a life unfold that was set in motion long before you knew you existed? On the surface, free will feels obvious. You choose what to wear in the morning, what to eat for lunch, whether to send that risky text or keep it in drafts. But peel back the layers and you see a different picture. Your DNA, inherited from people you never chose, has already set the stage for your temperament, your preferences, even your vulnerabilities, the neighborhood you grew up in, the people you met, the books you read, the traumas you endured. All of it shaped the person who now stands in line, choosing between a latte and a cappuccino. If all your choices are the sum of everything that came before, where in that chain is the you who decides? This is where determinism enters, the idea that every event, including every choice, has a cause. If your decision was the inevitable outcome of neurons firing in a brain wired by genetics and shaped by experience, can you really say it was free? The paradox emerges in the clash between how life feels and what logic suggests. You feel agency, the weight of responsibility when you choose kindness over cruelty, discipline over indulgence. And yet, if your choices were always going to happen exactly as they did, is that feeling an illusion? The implications are heavy. If free will doesn't exist, what does that mean for morality, justice, and accountability? If a thief steals because of a mix of hardwired impulses and a brutal upbringing, can they be blamed? If a genius excels because of natural talent and a privileged environment, how much of the credit is truly theirs? Without free will, the lines between choice and inevitability blur, and with them our ideas of praise, punishment, and fairness. But here's where the paradox gets interesting. Some philosophers argue that free will and determinism aren't enemies at all. This view, called compatibilism, says your choices can still be yours if they align with your desires and values, even if those desires and values are themselves the product of forces you didn't choose. In this view, freedom isn't about escaping cause and effect. It's about owning your part in it. You may not have chosen your cards, but you can choose how to play them. And then there's the darker possibility that free will is entirely an illusion, but one we desperately need. Imagine living as if every move you make was predetermined. Would you still strive for greatness? Would you still feel pride in success or guilt in failure? Perhaps the experience of freedom is what drives us forward, real or not. It gives us urgency, hope, and meaning. Even if the story is scripted, we live it better believing we're the authors. Maybe the free will paradox can't be solved, only lived with. Maybe the point isn't to prove freedom exists, but to act as if it does, to make choices with intention, to shape your life in ways that matter to you, even if the universe always knew you would. Because whether your decisions are carved into the fabric of fate or truly your own, you are the one standing there holding the cup you chose, and in that moment, sipping your latte, feeling the warmth seep through your hands. Freedom is whatever you decide it is. The infinite regress paradox. Close your eyes and picture this, an endless row of dominoes stretching into forever. You're standing in the middle. One falls to your left, another to your right, and each one knocks over the next in a chain that never seems to end. You can see the motion, you can hear the click of each impact, but the question begins to gnaw at you. Which domino fell first? Did someone push it? And if they did, who pushed them? And who pushed that? The further back you chase the answer, the more it escapes you, spiraling into infinity. This is the infinite regress paradox, a riddle that has haunted philosophers, scientists, and dreamers for centuries. It challenges the very foundation of cause and effect, forcing us to confront an unsettling possibility. If everything has a cause, where or when did it all begin? Every day, life convinces us that things follow a clear, orderly chain. Rain falls because clouds gather. Clouds gather because of evaporation. Evaporation happens because the sun heats the water. Easy enough. But when you keep asking why and what caused that, you quickly reach a point where the answers dissolve into mystery. The Earth came from cosmic dust, the dust from ancient stars, the stars from what? The Big Bang. And if so, what caused the Big Bang? Science can walk us to the edge of the beginning, but beyond that edge lies a silence it can't fill. Philosophers like Aristotle tried to solve the paradox by proposing a prime mover, an uncaused cause that set everything into motion. For some, that prime mover is God. For others, it's a natural force beyond time and space. But this answer only shifts the question: why should the prime mover itself be exempt from causation? Why does it get to break the rules? Others suggest there was no beginning at all, that the universe has always existed in an endless loop of causes and effects. But infinity is a concept that bends the human mind. We crave closure. We want a first chapter. The idea of existence without a start is as dizzying as the idea of something coming from nothing. Even the Big Bang, our most widely accepted scientific origin story, doesn't escape the paradox. If the universe began from a singularity, infinitely dense, impossibly small, What existed before it? Was there a before at all? Some theories point to quantum fluctuations, others to a multiverse where our universe is just one bubble among countless others. But every explanation we create still invites the same question. What caused that? The chain never ends. The infinite regress paradox isn't just about the cosmos, it's personal. Your life is also a chain of causes. Who you are today is shaped by the day before it, the year before it, the people who raised you, the events that shaped them, the events that shaped their parents, and on deeper into history. Where in that chain do you truly begin? Are you the inevitable outcome of everything that came before, or is there a first cause inside you, an uncaused spark that belongs to no one but yourself? Perhaps the paradox is unsolvable because it isn't meant to be solved. Maybe the point isn't to find the first domino, but to marvel that the dominoes are falling at all. The mystery of the chain doesn't diminish life, it deepens it. It reminds us that existence is not something we've mastered, it's something we're still learning to see. And maybe, just maybe, that endless line of dominoes isn't a problem to fix, but an invitation to step back, to watch the pattern, and to live your life fully, even if you never know where the first push came from. The paradox of control. We spend our lives trying to hold the reins. We make lists, set alarms, plan every detail down to the hour. We cling to routines, structure our days, and work tirelessly to keep chaos at bay. On the surface, it feels like control is the key to safety. If we can predict the future, we can protect ourselves from it. But sooner or later, life delivers its lesson. The tighter you grip, the more it slips through your fingers. That's the paradox of control, the unsettling truth that the more desperately we try to command every outcome, the less power we actually have. Control feels intoxicating because it gives us the illusion of certainty. When things go according to plan, we believe it's because we orchestrated them perfectly. But when reality veers off course, when the weather ruins the event, when someone we trust changes their mind, when the unexpected happens, our sense of stability shatters. The paradox reveals itself here. In trying to control everything, we set ourselves up for deeper disappointment when we inevitably fail. The world is too vast, too unpredictable for any single person to master. And yet we keep trying because surrender feels like weakness. Psychologists often point out that our need for control is rooted in fear. Fear of loss, fear of uncertainty, fear of being powerless. We cling to structure not just to manage life, but to manage ourselves. We think, if I can control my environment, I can control my emotions. But the irony is that rigid control often creates the very anxiety we're trying to avoid. Like holding water in your hands, the harder you squeeze, the faster it escapes. Some people go to the opposite extreme, abandoning control entirely, letting life push them wherever the current flows. But that isn't freedom. That's drifting. The paradox isn't telling us to give up control completely. It's telling us to understand where control is possible and where it's not. You can control your actions, your effort, your attitude. You can't control the weather, the economy, or the choices of other people. And the sooner you accept this, the lighter life becomes. The paradox of control teaches that real strength isn't in micromanaging the world, but in mastering your response to it. It's in knowing when to hold on and when to let go. A sailor doesn't control the wind, they adjust the sails. Likewise, we can shape our path without believing we command the sea itself. This shift in perspective turns control from a rigid demand into a flexible skill, one that thrives in uncertainty instead of being destroyed by it. The strange twist is that by loosening our grip, we often gain more influence. When we stop forcing outcomes, we open space for new opportunities to appear. We make better decisions when we're not acting out of desperation. We connect more deeply with people when we stop trying to control how they see us. Paradoxically, we achieve more control by accepting how little we truly have. So the next time life feels chaotic, remember, you are not here to dominate every detail. You are here to navigate it, to respond with clarity, to move with the rhythm of what is, instead of fighting it at every turn. The world will never bend entirely to your will, but your mind, your choices, your resilience, those are yours to command. And in a world you can't control, that's where your real power lives. The knowledge paradox. From the moment we can speak, we begin asking questions. Why is the sky blue? Where does the sun go at night? What happens when we die? Every answer we find feels like a step toward mastery, like we're slowly peeling away the mysteries of life. Knowledge feels like light, burning away the shadows of ignorance. But here's the twist. The more we learn, the more we realize how much we don't know. Every discovery opens the door to more questions, and the horizon of understanding keeps pulling further away. That's the knowledge paradox. The truth that the deeper your wisdom grows, the more you're confronted by the vastness of what you can never fully grasp. Think about it. As a child, the world seems small and simple. You believe adults have all the answers. But as you grow, you learn that even the smartest minds on the planet are fumbling through theories, debates, and incomplete truths. Science can explain the formation of galaxies, yet still struggles to answer what consciousness is. Medicine can save lives, yet still can't cure the deepest human suffering. Philosophy can explore the nature of existence, yet still can't tell you what happens after death. The pool of knowledge expands, but so does the ocean of uncertainty surrounding it. The paradox lies in this unsettling reality. Knowledge doesn't shrink your ignorance. It magnifies it. Imagine standing in the center of a circle. Inside that circle is everything you know. Outside is everything you don't. As your knowledge grows, your circle gets bigger, but so does the edge, where your understanding meets the unknown. Every new insight reveals more of the darkness beyond it. You gain answers, but you also gain awareness of just how many answers you lack. This can be humbling, even crushing. It challenges the ego, stripping away the illusion that you can ever truly arrive at complete understanding. Yet, it's also what makes learning so exhilarating. If there were an endpoint, if the universe could be fully explained and tied neatly in a bow, curiosity would wither. It's the unanswered questions that keep us searching, building, and evolving. Without the mystery, there is no journey. But the knowledge paradox also has a personal layer. In our relationships, in our careers, even in how we see ourselves, we often assume we've figured things out, until life throws us an experience that proves we've only been scratching the surface. We think we know who we are, what we want, what will make us happy. Then something shifts and we realize our certainty was an illusion. True wisdom isn't clinging to what you know. It's accepting how fluid and incomplete that knowing will always be. Some people resist this truth. They cling to rigid beliefs, convincing themselves they've found the final answer, the one truth that ends the search. But this isn't mastery. It's fear disguised as confidence. Real intellectual courage means living with the discomfort of uncertainty, trusting that not knowing is not weakness but possibility. It's the space where growth happens. The knowledge paradox is both humbling and empowering. It reminds us that no matter how far we travel, the horizon will always be just out of reach. But instead of resenting it, we can let it fuel us to keep asking, keep exploring, keep standing at the edge of what we know, ready to take the next step into the dark. Because the day you believe you know it all is the day you stop truly learning, and in that stillness, life stops expanding. The paradox of choice. At first, it feels like the ultimate freedom. Options. The more, the better. A closet full of clothes, a menu with endless dishes, a streaming library so vast you could never watch it all. Choice promises control, variety, and the ability to tailor life exactly to your preferences. But here's the catch. The more choices you have, the harder it becomes to choose at all. And even when you do, you're more likely to doubt your decision, regret it, or feel less satisfied than if you'd had fewer options to begin with. That's the paradox of choice, the strange reality that having more can actually make us feel worse. Psychologists call this choice overload. When faced with too many options, our brains struggle to process them. What should feel like abundance becomes overwhelming. You start comparing every possibility, trying to predict which one will make you happiest. But with every new option, the decision grows heavier. You imagine all the ways it could go wrong, and the pressure builds to make the perfect choice, because with so many possibilities, settling for good enough feels like failure. And then there's the shadow that follows you after the decision is made. Regret. Did you choose the right meal, the right job, the right partner? With more options, it's easier to imagine that one of the ones you didn't pick might have been better. This imagined better steals joy from the choice you did make. You don't fully commit to it because part of you is still living in the land of what if. It's not just personal decisions. The paradox of choice affects society at large. In consumer culture, we are told that freedom comes from having endless possibilities. But the truth is, this excess often paralyzes us. Studies show that when people are presented with fewer options, they decide faster, feel more confident, and are more satisfied with the outcome. Freedom, it turns out, isn't just about having choices. It's about having the right amount of them. On a deeper level, the paradox of choice teaches something uncomfortable about human nature. We're not built for limitless possibility. Our minds crave focus and clarity. When every path is open, we struggle to walk any of them with confidence. Sometimes we even avoid choosing at all, staying stuck in limbo because no option feels perfect enough to risk the regret. But avoiding choice is its own choice, and it comes with the cost of stagnation. The way out of the paradox isn't to eliminate choice entirely, it's to consciously limit it, define what matters to you, and filter out the noise. Instead of chasing the illusion of the perfect option, choose something that's good enough and commit to it fully. Life is not a game of finding the flawless path. It's about walking the one you choose with intention. Because here's the truth, satisfaction doesn't come from having everything. It comes from appreciating what you do have and investing in it deeply. Too many choices dilute that investment, scattering your energy and attention until you're left with a handful of half-lived experiences. But when you choose less, you live more. In that narrowing of focus, you find something richer than infinite possibility. You find peace. The paradox of vulnerability. We're taught from a young age to protect ourselves, to hide our weaknesses, to keep our deepest fears and rawest truths under lock and key, because if people see them, they might judge us, reject us, or worse, use them against us. Strength, we're told, is about being untouchable. And yet, in the quiet moments of life, something strange becomes clear. The very thing we avoid, showing our real selves, is often the thing that builds the strongest connections. That's the paradox of vulnerability. The truth that the more open we are about our wounds, fears, and imperfections, the stronger and more resilient we can become. Think about the relationships that matter most in your life. Chances are, they aren't built on flawless displays of confidence, but on shared moments of uncertainty. That night you admitted you were scared about your future. The time you told someone you were hurting and didn't know how to fix it. The afternoon you confessed, "I can't do this alone." Those moments, though terrifying in the moment, are the threads that tie people together. Vulnerability invites authenticity, and authenticity builds trust. The paradox works because vulnerability breaks down the walls we build to protect ourselves. The same walls that also keep love, connection, and understanding out. When you drop the mask and allow someone to see the unpolished truth, you give them permission to do the same. And in that exchange, the bond deepens. You stop performing for each other and start being with each other. But vulnerability is not the same as oversharing. It's not dumping every detail of your life on anyone who will listen. It's the deliberate act of opening up where it matters, in spaces where trust has room to grow. True vulnerability is not weakness, it's courage in its purest form. Because to be vulnerable, you have to step into uncertainty without guarantees. You have to risk rejection, misunderstanding, or even betrayal. Here's where the paradox sharpens its edge. We believe showing weakness will make us smaller in people's eyes, but more often it makes us larger. We admire the person who admits they don't have all the answers because it makes them human. We respect the leader who owns their mistakes because it makes them trustworthy. Vulnerability doesn't lower your strength, and it reveals the depth of it. Of course, the danger is real. Some people will exploit your openness. But the alternative, living behind walls so high no one can reach you, is its own kind of prison. You may feel safe, but you will also feel alone. And over time, that loneliness erodes you in ways far worse than the sting of a wound that heals. The paradox of vulnerability teaches that the risk is worth it. That strength and openness are not opposites, but partners. That showing the cracks in your armor can make your foundation stronger, not weaker. Because the truth is, no one connects with perfection. They connect with humanity. And humanity is messy, flawed, and endlessly beautiful. So, when the moment comes and you feel the instinct to hide, to pretend you're fine when you're not, remember this. The bridge you're afraid to cross, the one built from your own honesty, is often the only one that leads to the kind of love, trust, and connection that can weather any storm. The heart you protect too much will never feel the weight of real closeness. And in the end, that is the greater loss. The productivity paradox. We live in an age that worships productivity. The faster you work, the more you achieve, the busier your calendar looks, the more successful you're told you are. We wear exhaustion like a badge of honor, counting hours worked instead of moments lived. At first, it feels like progress. You pack more into each day, cross more tasks off your list, and push yourself to the edge in the name of achievement. But here's the twist. Beyond a certain point, the harder you try to get more done, the less effective you actually become. That's the productivity paradox, the strange truth that working more can lead to achieving less. It's easy to mistake activity for progress. You answer every email, attend every meeting, tackle every task that lands on your desk. But without pause, without prioritizing, you find yourself spinning in circles, busy all the time but moving nowhere. Your brain, like your body, has limits. Past a certain threshold, extra hours bring diminishing returns. Mental fatigue sets in, focus slips, creativity shrinks. You make more mistakes, solve problems more slowly, and your motivation starts to erode. The more you push, the less sharp you become. Psychologists and productivity experts agree. Rest is not the enemy of productivity. It's the fuel for it. When you step away, when you allow your mind to recharge, your efficiency and clarity increase. The paradox lies in this simple truth. Sometimes the most productive thing you can do is stop working. A well-rested mind can accomplish in 2 focused hours what a burned-out mind struggles to do in 6. But our culture rarely rewards slowing down. Instead, it praises the grind, even when the grind is quietly destroying the quality of our work. The productivity paradox also appears in our obsession with multitasking. We believe we can get more done by juggling multiple tasks at once, but science shows it actually slows us down. Each switch in focus costs mental energy, increasing errors and reducing overall output. True productivity isn't about doing more at once. It's about doing one thing well at a time. On a deeper level, this paradox forces us to ask, what is all this productivity for? Are we chasing more work just for the sake of working, or are we creating space for the things that matter? Health, relationships, joy, meaning. If productivity becomes the goal instead of the tool, we risk losing sight of why we're doing any of it. The real mastery lies in balance, in setting boundaries, in knowing when to push forward and when to pull back, in choosing impact over volume. 100 meaningless tasks will never equal one meaningful accomplishment. The person who works with intention will always surpass the one who simply works without pause. So the next time you feel the pressure to do more, stop and ask yourself, is this actually moving me forward or just keeping me in motion? Because the paradox is clear. The endless chase for productivity can rob you of the very results you're running toward. Slow down, focus, rest, and you'll find that doing less in the right way often achieves far more than doing everything all at once. The paradox of freedom. Freedom is one of the most intoxicating words in the human language. We dream of it, fight for it, define our lives by it. The idea that we can make our own choices, live by our own rules, and follow our own path feels like the highest form of happiness. We imagine freedom as an open horizon with no fences, no boundaries, no one telling us where to go or who to be. But here's the twist. The more unlimited our freedom becomes, the more lost, anxious, and unfulfilled we can feel. That's the paradox of freedom, the unsettling truth that true freedom often requires limits. On the surface, it seems obvious. The fewer restrictions you have, the more liberated you are. But pure, unrestricted freedom can quickly become overwhelming. When every path is open, every choice possible, and nothing is guiding you, you may find yourself paralyzed by indecision. It's the same sensation as standing before an endless buffet. At first it feels like abundance, but soon you realize that without focus, you can't truly enjoy any of it. Without boundaries, every choice feels both infinite and meaningless. Psychologists have observed this in modern life. We live in an age with more freedom than any generation before us, more career paths, more lifestyles, more personal expression. Yet rates of anxiety, depression, and dissatisfaction have never been higher. One reason is that absolute freedom removes structure, and structure is what gives life shape. Without some constraints, your energy scatters, your sense of direction weakens, and your life becomes a series of disconnected experiments rather than a meaningful journey. The paradox of freedom also plays out in relationships. Imagine you want complete freedom in love. No commitments, no promises, no responsibilities. At first it feels exhilarating, but without commitment there's no depth, no shared history, no trust built over time. You have all the freedom in the world, but none of the security or meaning that makes connection fulfilling. Freedom without responsibility can be hollow. True freedom isn't the absence of limits. It's the ability to choose the right ones. A musician is free to play whatever they want, but they can only create beautiful music because they've accepted the discipline of learning their instrument. An athlete is free to perform at their best because they've committed to the limits of training. Paradoxically, it's often the rules, routines, and commitments we embrace that give us the most space to grow. The real danger of limitless freedom is that it can leave you without a foundation. Without something to anchor you, a purpose, a set of values, a chosen direction, you drift. And drifting may feel free in the short term, but in the long term it leads to disconnection, aimlessness, and regret. The mind needs constraints the way the body needs bones, not to restrict it, but to give it shape. So the paradox of freedom is a quiet reminder. The goal is not to erase all boundaries, but to choose the ones that serve you, to set the rules that align with your purpose, to commit to the people, passions, and principles that make your life richer. Because freedom without meaning is emptiness, but freedom shaped by intention is power. The paradox of perception. You don't see the world as it is, you see it as you are. Every sight, sound, and sensation you experience is filtered through the lens of your mind, your memories, beliefs, emotions, and expectations. You believe your senses are giving you an objective picture of reality, but in truth, they are giving you a personalized version of it. That's the paradox of perception, the realization that the very tool you use to understand the world is also the thing that distorts it. From the moment you open your eyes in the morning, perception begins shaping your reality. The color of the walls, the tone in someone's voice, the meaning behind a stranger's glance. None of these things exist to you as pure facts. They are instantly translated and reinterpreted by your brain. Two people can witness the same event and walk away with entirely different memories of it, each convinced that their version is the truth. This isn't dishonesty, it's biology. Your brain doesn't record reality like a camera, it reconstructs it like a painter, adding strokes of emotion, expectation, and past experience to every scene. This paradox means that reality, in the way you live it, is always subjective. And yet, because perception feels so immediate and convincing, we rarely question it. We trust what we see, we trust what we feel, but perception is a storyteller, not a historian. It leaves things out. It exaggerates certain details and minimizes others. It even invents pieces that were never there, just to make the narrative feel complete. On a deeper level, the paradox of perception shapes not only how we see the world, but also how we see ourselves. Your self-image, whether you believe you're strong or weak, worthy or unworthy, is not based on pure truth but on years of internalized perceptions, many of which were handed to you by others. A compliment can make you feel capable. A single insult can make you doubt yourself for years. Neither was an absolute truth, but both felt real because you perceived them that way. This paradox can be dangerous because we act on perception as if it were reality. If you perceive someone as a threat, your body responds with fear, whether or not they truly mean you harm. If you perceive a situation as hopeless, you may stop trying, even if success was possible. Our actions often follow not truth, but belief, and beliefs are built on perception. But here's the hopeful side. Because perception shapes reality, changing perception can change reality. If you choose to interpret setbacks as lessons rather than failures, your world becomes a place of growth instead of defeat. If you train yourself to see kindness instead of hostility, opportunities instead of obstacles, you begin to live in a different version of the same world. The external facts may be the same, but the experience is entirely transformed. The paradox of perception doesn't mean truth doesn't exist. It means we will never see it purely, only through the filter of our minds. The challenge then is to question those filters, to ask yourself, is what I'm seeing the whole truth, or just the version my mind is showing me? It's in this awareness that real clarity begins. Because the moment you recognize your perception's limits, you gain the ability to step beyond them. And maybe that's the gift hidden in the paradox, the knowledge that you can shape the lens you see through. You may never see reality exactly as it is, but you can choose to make your perception one that empowers you instead of trapping you. And in doing so, you begin to create a reality that feels not just real but worth living in. The paradox of time. Time is the one resource every single human shares equally. Each of us is given 24 hours in a day, no more, no less. It ticks forward with perfect consistency, second after second, minute after minute, and yet our experience of it is anything but consistent. A single hour can feel like an eternity when you're in pain or waiting for something you desperately want. A whole day can vanish in what feels like minutes when you're lost in joy or deep focus. This is the paradox of time. The strange truth that time is both absolute and completely subjective, an unchanging measure that bends and warps depending on how we live it. We live in two different realities when it comes to time, the clock's time and the mind's time. The clock says an hour is always 60 minutes, but our minds turn time into something fluid. This is why childhood summers feel endless, but adult years disappear in a blur. As children, every experience is new, every moment full of discovery. Novelty stretches our sense of time, but as we age, routine takes over. Days become similar, memories blur together, and before we know it, entire months feel like they've passed in a single breath. The paradox is that the more we crave time, the faster it seems to slip away, and the more we try to hold on to it, the less of it we seem to have. On another level, time is deeply tied to emotion. When we're anxious, time slows. Waiting for news, sitting in a hospital, enduring heartbreak. Each minute drags because we are hyper-aware of every tick of the clock. When we're joyful or immersed in something meaningful, time speeds up because our focus isn't on the clock at all. This means time isn't just a measure, it's an emotional experience, and our relationship with it can either make life feel abundant or painfully scarce. The paradox grows sharper when we consider how we use our time. We often think we're saving time with shortcuts, multitasking, or rushing through tasks, but in reality, we're often just stripping the meaning out of our moments. We free up hours only to spend them on distractions that leave us feeling emptier. We work endlessly to buy more free time in the future, but by the time that future comes, we're too exhausted to enjoy it. In chasing time, we forget that it can't be stored. It can only be lived right now. Time also plays a cruel trick. It's the measure of our entire existence, yet we can never see how much of it we have left. This uncertainty can either paralyze us or push us to live more fully. The paradox here is that while time is finite, it becomes infinite in meaning when we choose to be fully present. A single moment of true presence, watching the sunset, holding someone you love, laughing until you can't breathe, can feel more valuable than entire years spent on autopilot. And then there's the existential side of the paradox. Time, in its purest form, might not even exist the way we think it does. Some physicists argue that past, present, and future all exist simultaneously, that the flow of time is an illusion created by human consciousness. If that's true, then our entire understanding of life as a forward-moving journey is just a story we tell ourselves. The paradox of time teaches us a hard truth. We can't control how fast it moves, but we can control how deeply we live within it. We can slow the experience of time by seeking novelty, by paying attention, by breaking free from the dull repetition that makes days blur together. We can stop treating time as something to be managed like money and start treating it as something to be experienced like art. Because in the end, time is both the most ruthless and the most generous gift we're given. It will pass whether you cherish it or waste it. It will vanish whether you're ready or not. But if you live fully in each moment, if you fill your minutes with meaning instead of noise, you'll find that time, no matter how much you have, will feel like enough. And maybe that's the only way to truly win against the clock. The paradox of success. From the outside, success looks like the ultimate destination. It's the mountaintop we imagine from childhood, the moment when all our sacrifices pay off, when the hard years of struggle finally give way to ease, pride, and fulfillment. We spend years, sometimes decades, chasing it. We push through sleepless nights, take risks, make compromises, all for the promise of one day standing at the summit and feeling complete. But here's the cruel twist. The closer you get to success, the more you realize it doesn't deliver the permanent happiness you thought it would. That's the paradox of success, the strange reality that achieving your goals often creates as many problems as it solves, and in some ways leaves you searching for more than before. It starts with a dream. In the beginning, the vision of success fuels you. It gives your struggles meaning and turns the grind into something almost romantic. Every small win feels like proof that you're on your way. You tell yourself, once I get there, life will be perfect. But success, when it arrives, rarely feels like the finish line. Instead, it often feels like a new kind of pressure. Now that you've achieved it, you have to maintain it. People's expectations grow, your own expectations grow, and suddenly, instead of climbing toward the summit, you're clinging to it, afraid of falling. There's also the reality that success changes you, and not always in ways you expect. The sacrifices you made to get there may have left other parts of your life neglected. Relationships can suffer, health can decline. Passions that once drove you may burn out under the constant demand to perform. And sometimes, once the dream becomes reality, it loses its magic. The thrill of the chase is gone, and you're left wondering, is this it? Is this all there is? Psychologists talk about hedonic adaptation, the human tendency to return to a baseline level of happiness no matter what changes happen in our lives. This means even the most exciting success eventually becomes your new normal. The promotion, the award, the dream home, all of it fades into routine, and you start looking for the next mountain to climb. The paradox is that success doesn't end the chase. It often intensifies it. On a deeper level, the paradox of success challenges the very definition of success itself. If your idea of achievement is entirely external, money, titles, recognition, then you are placing your happiness in things that are outside your full control. External success is fragile. It can be taken away by forces you can't predict, a market shift, a betrayal, a single mistake. But internal success, the kind built on personal growth, resilience, and self-respect, is something no one can take from you. Yet this is often the kind of success we overlook in pursuit of the external kind. There's also the subtle trap of identity. Many people become so defined by their success that they fear who they'd be without it. The entrepreneur who can't imagine themselves outside of their company, the athlete who loses purpose when their career ends, the artist who's terrified their best work is behind them. When your worth becomes tied to achievement, you live in constant fear of losing it, and that fear can drain the joy from the very thing you worked so hard for. The paradox of success isn't telling us to stop chasing our dreams. It's telling us to chase them differently. To remember that success is not a place where life finally begins. Life is happening along the way. It's found in the late nights, the failures, the lessons, the moments you kept going when you wanted to quit. If you pin all your happiness to a future moment, you risk missing the richness of the present. So when you do reach the mountaintop, don't just cling to it out of fear. Look around, breathe it in, And then be willing to climb down and find another path, not because you're endlessly chasing more, but because growth and meaning are never fixed destinations. They are journeys without end. True success is knowing you can keep moving, not because you're unsatisfied, but because there's always another way to live fully. And that perhaps is the only kind of success that doesn't fade. The paradox of happiness. Happiness is the one thing everyone claims to want, yet the more we chase it directly, the more it seems to slip through our fingers. We treat it like a destination, a place we'll arrive at once we have the right job, the right partner, the right body, the right bank balance. We think once I get there, I'll finally feel at peace. But here's the cruel twist. The harder you try to grab happiness, the more elusive it becomes. That's the paradox of happiness. The strange truth that happiness is often found when you stop obsessively pursuing it. This happens because the act of chasing happiness turns it into a goal with conditions. You tell yourself you'll be happy when you succeed, when you're loved, when you've fixed everything about yourself you think is broken. But in doing this, you push happiness into the future, out of reach in the present. Every moment becomes a waiting room for the life you think you deserve. The chase itself becomes exhausting, and ironically, it makes you less happy. Psychologists call this the happiness trap. When you make happiness your primary goal, you begin to monitor yourself constantly. Am I happy yet? Am I as happy as I should be? That self-surveillance creates pressure, and pressure kills joy. You start comparing yourself to others, measuring your life against some imagined standard, and even when good things happen, you fear they won't last. The more you focus on happiness, the more fragile it feels. The paradox is that happiness thrives most when it's not the central focus. It's often a byproduct of other pursuits, meaning connection, creativity, growth. You're happiest when you're fully immersed in life, not when you're standing outside of it, analyzing how happy you are. This is why people often feel joy in unexpected places, while helping someone else, while learning something new, while working toward a goal that's bigger than themselves. There's another layer to this paradox. Happiness isn't meant to be constant. Life isn't designed to be one long, uninterrupted high. Our emotional range exists for a reason. Sadness deepens our appreciation for joy. Struggle makes moments of peace feel more valuable. When you expect to feel happy all the time, every normal fluctuation starts to feel like failure, which makes you less happy in the long run. True happiness is also tied to acceptance, not of a perfect life, but of life as it is. This doesn't mean giving up on growth or improvement, but it means no longer postponing your ability to feel content until everything aligns perfectly. You start to realize that happiness is not the reward at the end of the journey. It's something that can exist alongside the mess, the uncertainty, and the imperfections. The paradox of happiness invites us to shift our focus from seeking happiness to living fully, to invest our energy in relationships, meaningful work, curiosity, and presence, the things that naturally give rise to joy without us forcing it. When you live this way, happiness stops being a finish line and becomes a companion, sometimes quiet, sometimes loud, but always moving with you. Because in the end, the happiest people are rarely the ones who wake up every day asking, "How can I be happy today?" They are the ones who wake up asking, "How can I live today?" And in living, really living, they stumble upon happiness in the most ordinary, unexpected, and lasting ways. The paradox of love. Love is the most sought-after human experience. We write songs about it, build our lives around it, and ache for it in its absence. We imagine it as the thing that will complete us, the force that will heal old wounds, silence our insecurities, and make life worth living. But here's the paradox. The deeper you love, the more you open yourself to loss, pain, and vulnerability. Love gives life its sweetness, but it also exposes you to its deepest sorrows. That's the paradox of love. The truth that the very thing that makes life beautiful is also the thing that can break your heart. At its core, love is an act of surrender. You hand someone the ability to affect you deeply, to lift you higher than you've ever been, but also to wound you in ways no one else can. You trust them with your secrets, your flaws, your rawest self. And in doing so, you willingly give up a part of your emotional armor. This is why love is both intoxicating and terrifying. You cannot truly experience it without accepting the risk that it could one day be taken away. The paradox becomes clear when we realize that love's power comes from its impermanence. The very fact that it can be lost makes it precious. If love were guaranteed forever, if there were no possibility of heartbreak, it would lose some of its urgency and depth. The fragility of love forces us to cherish it in the present moment, to hold it with both gratitude and humility. But love also challenges our sense of self. When you care deeply for someone, their happiness becomes intertwined with your own. Their pain becomes your pain. In loving them, you expand your world beyond your own needs and desires. This can be transformative, but it can also leave you feeling exposed. The stronger the bond, the more you feel their absence when they're gone, whether through distance, betrayal, or death. There's another layer to the paradox of love. It demands freedom and commitment at the same time. For love to flourish, both people must feel free to be themselves, yet also deeply committed to the relationship. Too much control and love suffocates, too much distance and love fades. Balancing these forces, intimacy and individuality, is one of the greatest challenges of any lasting relationship. And yet, despite all of this, we keep choosing love. We choose it knowing it could hurt us, knowing it might not last, knowing it will require work, compromise, and forgiveness. Why? Because even with its risks, love gives life a richness nothing else can match. It's in the way someone's laugh can change your whole day, the way a touch can say more than 1,000 words, the way shared memories become a language only you and they can speak. The paradox of love is a reminder that the things that matter most in life are often the ones that make us most vulnerable. Love will never be risk-free, and that's exactly why it's worth it. To love fully is to accept that your heart will at times be unguarded, but in that unguarded state, you experience the most profound connections, the deepest joys, and the kind of meaning that makes all the risks worthwhile. Because in the end, the alternative to love is safety without depth, a life without the very thing that makes it feel truly alive. And while safety has its comfort, it cannot compare to the fierce, messy, and breathtaking reality of a heart that dares to love anyway. The paradox of strength. Strength is something we admire, something we strive for. We think of it as unshakable resilience, the ability to endure hardship, stand tall in the face of challenges, and remain unbroken no matter what life throws at us. We imagine that the stronger we become, the less we will hurt, the less we will struggle, and the less life will be able to wound us. But here's the twist. Real strength isn't about being invulnerable. In fact, the strongest people are often the ones who have been broken, who have fallen apart, and yet still choose to rise. That's the paradox of strength. The truth that true strength is born from moments of weakness, not the absence of them. When we picture strength, we often see an unbending pillar, a wall that cannot be moved, but unbending things can snap when the pressure is too much. True strength is more like tempered steel, forged in fire, shaped by blows, and made resilient by surviving heat that would destroy something weaker. A person who has never been tested may look strong from the outside, but it's only in the storms that we discover what strength really is. The paradox lies in the fact that to build strength, you have to experience struggle. Muscles grow only when they are pushed beyond their limits, when fibers tear and rebuild stronger than before. Emotional and mental strength work the same way. Pain, loss, and failure are the weights life places in your hands. They're heavy, sometimes unbearably so, but lifting them over time changes you. It doesn't make life easier. It makes you more capable of facing it. Yet in our culture, we often mistake suppression for strength. We think not crying, not showing emotion, and never asking for help means we're strong. But real strength is not the absence of emotion, it's the courage to face it. It's being willing to admit when you're struggling, to seek help when you need it, and to keep going even when you're terrified. Strength is not about pretending you're unbreakable, it's about refusing to stay broken. There's another layer to this paradox. Strength often requires softness. A leader who cannot listen, who cannot empathize may seem strong, but they create division instead of unity. A friend who hides behind a stoic mask may seem in control, but they miss the deeper intimacy that comes from sharing their truth. Sometimes the strongest act is not holding the weight alone, but letting someone else help you carry it. The paradox of strength also reminds us that strength is situational. Being strong doesn't mean you have to fight every battle, endure every hardship, or carry every burden. Sometimes, strength is knowing when to walk away, when to rest, and when to choose peace over constant struggle. It's not just about enduring, it's about knowing where to invest your energy. In the end, the paradox of strength teaches that your power doesn't come from never falling. It comes from what you do after you fall. Every scar, every moment you thought you couldn't go on but did, every time you faced something that once would have destroyed you, these are the building blocks of a strength that no one can take from you. Because strength is not about how much you can bear while pretending nothing hurts. It's about how much you can bear and still keep your heart open. And when you understand that, you realize that your greatest strength is not in being untouchable, but in being both unbreakable and profoundly human. The paradox of silence. Silence is often misunderstood. In a world filled with constant noise and notifications buzzing, conversations overlapping, media streaming at all hours, silence can feel uncomfortable, even threatening. We rush to fill it with words, sounds, or distractions, fearing what might surface in the stillness. Yet here lies the twist. Silence can be both the most peaceful and the most unbearable state, depending on how we meet it. That's the paradox of silence. The truth that silence can heal you or haunt you, connect you to yourself, or confront you with the parts of yourself you'd rather avoid. On one side, silence is a sanctuary. It's the space where your mind can finally breathe, where thoughts settle like dust in still air. In silence, you can hear the subtler rhythms of life, your own heartbeat, the whisper of wind through trees, the quiet awareness of simply existing. This kind of silence restores. It gives you the distance from the world's chaos to think clearly, to feel deeply, to reconnect with what matters beneath the noise. Many of history's greatest insights, works of art, and moments of clarity were born not in the noise of the crowd but in the solitude of silence. But there's another side to this paradox. Silence can also be deafening. When you've been avoiding your emotions, silence strips away the distractions that keep them buried. It forces you to hear your own fears, regrets, and doubts without the buffer of busyness. For some, this is unbearable. The absence of noise becomes a mirror, one that reflects back everything you've tried not to face. This is why many people avoid silence at all costs, filling every moment with sound, conversation, or activity, because stillness leaves no place to hide. Silence in relationships carries its own complexity. It can be comforting. Two people sitting together without speaking, connected by presence alone. It can be intimate, a sign of deep trust. But silence can also be a weapon, the cold withdrawal of the silent treatment, where the absence of words says more than any argument could. The same lack of sound can mean safety in one moment and distance in another. The paradox of silence also extends to communication itself. Sometimes the most powerful statements are made without a single word. A pause before a response can convey thoughtfulness. The lack of a reply can send a louder message than any explanation. In moments of grief, there are no perfect words, only the quiet presence of someone willing to sit with you in the darkness. Learning to navigate this paradox means learning to sit with silence without fear. It means allowing it to be a tool instead of a threat, a place where you can process, heal, and grow. It means understanding that silence is not empty. It is full of meaning, waiting for you to listen. In the end, the paradox of silence teaches that it's not the absence of sound that matters, but the presence you bring into it. In silence, you can find yourself, or you can lose yourself. Which one it becomes depends on whether you meet it with resistance or acceptance. And when you stop running from it, you may find that silence is not just the absence of noise, but the beginning of truth. The paradox of failure. Failure is one of the most feared experiences in human life. From childhood, we're taught to avoid it, to treat it as a mark of shame, a sign that we weren't good enough, prepared enough, or worthy enough. Society conditions us to see failure as the opposite of success, as something to be hidden or overcome as quickly as possible. But here's the contradiction. The people who achieve the deepest growth, the strongest resilience, and the most meaningful success are often the ones who have failed the most. That's the paradox of failure. The truth that failure far from being the enemy of progress, is one of its most essential ingredients. At first glance, failure feels final, a door slamming shut, an opportunity lost. It stings because it doesn't just challenge our abilities. It challenges our identity. We tell ourselves stories about what failure means. I'm not talented enough, not smart enough, not meant for this. But those are illusions created in the moment of pain. In reality, failure is not a verdict. It's feedback. It's life's way of showing us what doesn't work so we can discover what does. Without that feedback, we would be trapped repeating the same mistakes in the dark. The paradox deepens when you realize that the fear of failure often creates the very thing you're trying to avoid. When you're so afraid to fail that you don't take risks, you guarantee stagnation. You stay safe, yes, but you also stay small. The comfort zone, after all, is just a slow death disguised as security. Every great breakthrough in history, every innovation, every leap forward has come from someone willing to risk falling flat on their face. Failure also has a way of stripping away the non-essential. It humbles you, forcing you to confront what you truly want and why you're willing to endure hardship for it. Success can sometimes inflate the ego, but failure has a way of sharpening focus. It asks, do you still want this even if it hurts? Even if it's harder than you thought? Even if no one else believes in you? Those who answer yes to that question are the ones who rise stronger than before. There's another layer to this paradox. Failure can open doors you didn't even know existed. A lost job leads to a career you never considered. A rejected idea evolves into something far better. A broken relationship teaches you the boundaries and self-worth you'll carry into the next one. What feels like an ending in the moment is often the foundation for something greater. But you can only see that when you stop viewing failure as destruction and start seeing it as transformation. Psychologists and athletes alike know this truth. You build skill by stretching your limits, and stretching your limits inevitably means failing sometimes. The most skilled performers, the most talented creators, the most inspiring leaders, they don't get where they are by avoiding mistakes. They get there by learning faster than others, because they've made more mistakes than others. Every failure becomes a stepping stone if you let it. The paradox of failure also holds a warning. Not all failure is equal. Repeating the same mistakes without reflection is not growth, it's self-sabotage. True resilience comes from extracting the lesson from each failure and using it to move forward differently. In this way, failure becomes a teacher, and the most valuable one you'll ever have. In the end, the paradox of failure teaches that the goal is not to eliminate failure from your life, but to change your relationship with it, to see it not as proof of your inadequacy, but as evidence that you are in motion, that you are daring, that you are pushing against the edges of what's possible. Failure may sting, but stagnation kills. And the only way to truly fail in life is to refuse to try at all. Because the truth is, success is built on the ruins of countless failures, and the people we admire most are not those who never fell, but those who kept getting up again and again, until their persistence became the story that outshone every defeat. The paradox of peace. Peace is something we imagine as the ultimate goal, a stillness in the heart, a life free from conflict, chaos, and unrest. We picture it as lying on a quiet beach, sitting by a calm lake, or waking each day without the weight of stress pressing down on us. We believe that once we find peace, everything will finally feel right. But here's the paradox. True peace is not the absence of conflict, struggle, or noise. In fact, real peace is forged in the very midst of those things. It's not something handed to you by perfect circumstances. It's something you create within yourself, despite the imperfection of the world. At first glance, peace seems like something external, a product of your environment. If only the world were quieter, kinder, and simpler, then you'd feel at ease. But life is rarely so generous. Even in moments of calm, unexpected storms can arrive without warning. A single phone call, a sudden loss, a shift in circumstances. These can disrupt the fragile tranquility you thought you'd found. The paradox is that if your peace depends entirely on everything outside you being calm, you'll never truly have it. True peace is an inside job. It's the steady center that remains even when the world is shaking. It's the ability to sit in discomfort without letting it consume you, to acknowledge fear without letting it dictate your actions, to face chaos without becoming chaos yourself. This kind of peace doesn't come from avoiding challenges. It comes from developing the inner strength to meet them with clarity instead of panic. The paradox of peace also lies in how we often think we can earn it by eliminating all sources of stress. We imagine that if we quit the hard job, end the difficult relationship, move to a quieter place, then we'll finally be at peace. But when we run from discomfort instead of learning to navigate it, we carry the same restlessness with us wherever we go. Peace built on escape is fragile. One disruption and it shatters. Peace built on acceptance is unshakable. There's another layer. Peace isn't always gentle. Sometimes creating peace requires confrontation, setting boundaries, speaking uncomfortable truths, or walking away from situations that harm you. People often mistake this for conflict, but in reality, it's the act of protecting the conditions in which peace can grow. Peace doesn't mean being passive. It often requires courage and decisive action. On a deeper level, peace asks us to accept the things we cannot control. Much of our unrest comes from resisting reality, wishing people would behave differently, circumstances would align in our favor, or life would play out according to our plans. But when you stop fighting against what is and start focusing on how you respond to it, you discover a freedom that no external chaos can touch. The paradox of peace reminds us that you don't find peace at the end of the storm. You learn to carry it with you in the middle of it. You stop chasing a perfect life and start creating a steady mind. And in doing so, you realize that peace was never out there to begin with. It was always a skill, a choice, a way of living, because in the end, peace is not about the world finally becoming quiet. It's about you becoming quiet inside, no matter how loud the world gets. And once you understand that, you stop waiting for peace to arrive, and you start becoming it. The paradox of trust. Trust is one of the most fragile yet powerful forces in human life. It's the invisible bridge between people, the thing that allows us to love, to cooperate, to share our vulnerabilities without fear. We often think of trust as a reward. We give someone who has proven themselves, a gift that once given should remain strong. But here's the paradox. Trust takes years to build, seconds to break, and often forever to repair. And yet we cannot live a full connected life without placing it in someone's hands. To trust is to take a risk. It's to give another person the power to harm you, emotionally or otherwise, and believe they won't. It's the quiet faith that they'll show up when they say they will, keep their promises, protect your secrets, and act in ways that honor the bond between you. Without this leap of faith, relationships, whether romantic, familial, or professional, can't truly thrive. But the same leap that creates closeness also makes you vulnerable to betrayal. The paradox deepens because trust isn't binary, it's layered. You might trust someone to tell you the truth but not to handle your money. You might trust a friend with your emotions but not your plans. Every layer of trust opens a new door, and with each door comes the possibility of it being slammed shut. And once trust is broken, it rarely returns to its original state. Even when forgiveness is given, a crack remains, a part of you that stays cautious, scanning for signs that the hurt might happen again. Yet, trust is not just about others, it's also about yourself. Many people struggle to trust others because deep down, they don't trust their own judgment. If you've been betrayed before, you might question your ability to choose who is safe. If you've broken promises to yourself by ignoring your needs, staying in harmful situations, or silencing your truth, then trusting anyone else feels dangerous. The ability to trust others begins with the ability to trust yourself. There's another twist in the paradox of trust. You can't guarantee it before giving it. You can't demand proof someone will never hurt you. Life doesn't work that way. Trust must be extended before it can be confirmed. This is what makes it both beautiful and terrifying. To open yourself to trust is to say, I know this could go wrong, and I'm willing to take that chance anyway. That leap is what makes human connection possible. But it's also why trust can feel so fragile. Trust also evolves over time. In the beginning, it's often based on hope, a belief in someone's potential rather than a proven history. Over time, as actions align with words, that trust solidifies. But the reverse is also true. When actions contradict words, even once, the foundation begins to shake. And unlike material things, trust can't be rebuilt through force. It can only be rebuilt through consistent, patient, honest effort. The paradox of trust teaches us that vulnerability and security are not opposites. They are partners. You can't have the security of a truly close relationship without risking vulnerability. You can't have meaningful intimacy without opening yourself to the possibility of being hurt. And though betrayal is devastating, the alternative, never trusting anyone at all, leads to isolation and loneliness. In the end, trust is less about certainty and more about courage. It's the decision to believe in someone despite knowing they're human and imperfect. It's the willingness to risk your heart because you understand that connection is worth the gamble. And when trust is mutual, honored, and nurtured, it becomes one of the strongest, most transformative forces in life, a bridge that not only connects two people, but makes both stronger for having crossed it. The paradox of generosity. Generosity is celebrated as one of the purest human virtues. We're taught that giving to others, whether it's time, money, energy, or love, makes the world better and brings us closer together. We imagine generosity as something that flows endlessly from a good heart, always noble, always right. But here's the paradox. Giving can both enrich your life and quietly drain it. It can make you stronger or leave you depleted. And sometimes, the act of giving too much can hurt not only you, but also the very people you're trying to help. On one side, generosity is deeply fulfilling. Helping others can bring meaning to your life in ways nothing else can. It creates connection, fosters gratitude, and allows you to feel part of something larger than yourself. Studies show that acts of kindness trigger the brain's reward centers, releasing dopamine and endorphins, a natural helper's high. When you give with sincerity, you're not just helping others, you're also nurturing your own sense of purpose. But the paradox emerges when giving crosses an invisible line. When generosity is driven not by compassion, but by guilt, fear, or the need for validation, it stops being healthy. You may find yourself giving to avoid conflict, to earn approval, or to prove your worth. And in doing so, you slowly sacrifice your own boundaries. Over time, you can become resentful, burned out, or even lose your sense of self, all while still being praised for your selflessness. Another twist in the paradox of generosity is that giving too much can foster dependency rather than empowerment. If you continually solve someone's problems for them, they may never develop the skills or confidence to solve them on their own. True generosity sometimes means stepping back, allowing others to struggle, and giving them the space to grow. It's not always about giving more. Sometimes it's about giving wisely. Generosity also demands self-awareness. If you give at the expense of your own well-being, you're not practicing virtue. You're engaging in self-erasure. Healthy generosity operates within boundaries. It knows the difference between I want to help and I must help, or I'm a bad person. It understands that you cannot pour from an empty cup and that sustaining kindness over a lifetime requires caring for yourself first. The paradox deepens because generosity, when authentic, is not a transaction. It's not about expecting something in return, gratitude, loyalty, recognition. Yet when those things are absent, we often feel hurt. This reveals a hard truth. Sometimes what we call generosity is really an unspoken bargain. Recognizing this in ourselves doesn't make us bad. It makes us human. But true generosity is clean, given without strings, and powerful because it's free. There's also a societal layer to this paradox. In cultures where overwork and self-sacrifice are glorified, people often wear their exhaustion as proof of their generosity. But burnout doesn't make you more valuable to others. It makes you less able to help them. Sometimes, the most generous act is not another sacrifice, but the decision to rest so you can return with your full strength. In the end, the paradox of generosity reminds us that the goal is not to give endlessly, but to give in a way that sustains both you and the person you're helping. It's about understanding that generosity without boundaries is not kindness. It's self-abandonment. And when you give from a place of wholeness instead of depletion, your generosity stops being a temporary fix and starts becoming a force that truly transforms lives, including your own. The paradox of attention. Attention is one of the most valuable currencies in our modern world. Wherever you direct it, you give life, energy, and meaning. Your attention shapes your priorities, defines your relationships, and determines the quality of your experiences. It's what makes someone feel seen, what turns fleeting moments into lasting memories. But here's the paradox. The more deliberately you try to control and focus your attention, the more it can slip away. And in a time when countless forces are fighting to capture it, the more attention you give to everything, the less deeply you give it to anything. On the surface, attention feels like a simple act. You look at something, listen to someone, think about a topic, and you're paying attention. But the reality is far more complex. Attention is finite. Every time you give it to one thing, you are, by default, taking it away from something else. This means that what you choose to notice shapes not just your day, but your entire life. If your attention is scattered across endless distractions, your experiences become shallow, fragmented, and ultimately unsatisfying. If your attention is focused deeply and intentionally, life becomes richer, more meaningful, and more grounded. The paradox deepens when we realize that attention can't be entirely controlled. The harder you try to force it, to not think about something, to avoid a particular thought or feeling, the more your mind circles back to it. This is known as the ironic process of thought suppression. The mental effort to steer attention away from something actually keeps it alive in your awareness. The more you say, "I will not focus on that," the more it lingers. We also live in an attention economy, a world designed to hijack and monetize your focus. Social media platforms, entertainment industries, advertisements, even the news, all compete for a slice of your awareness, using algorithms and psychological triggers to keep you engaged for as long as possible. The more of your attention you give away without thinking, the less you have left for the things that truly matter to you. And yet, these systems work so well because they play on another paradox. Our attention is drawn not just to what we value, but to what is novel, shocking, or emotionally charged, even when it adds no real value to our lives. In relationships, attention is both a gift and a test. Giving someone your full attention, putting down your phone, looking them in the eyes, truly listening, can make them feel valued in a way no words can match. But the flip side is just as powerful. When your attention drifts, when you give someone only a fraction of yourself, they can feel the absence immediately. This creates a strange dynamic where attention becomes both deeply appreciated and painfully noticeable when missing. The paradox of attention also applies inwardly. We often believe that paying closer attention to ourselves, our thoughts, our flaws, our insecurities, will help us fix what's wrong. But excessive self-focus can trap us in loops of overthinking, making problems feel bigger and more overwhelming than they really are. Sometimes the best way to regain balance isn't to scrutinize yourself harder, but to direct your attention outward toward meaningful action. And then there's the ultimate irony. Attention is both a tool and an experience. We use it to accomplish goals, solve problems, and learn. But the quality of our lives is also directly tied to where our attention rests in each moment. If you constantly think ahead, your present life slips by unnoticed. If you linger too long in the past, you miss what's unfolding now. True presence requires a kind of gentle discipline, the ability to notice when your attention has wandered and to bring it back without judgment. The paradox of attention teaches that focus is not about holding on tighter, but about letting go of the noise that pulls you in every direction. It's about choosing, again and again, where you want your mind to rest, not just for productivity, but for meaning. The truth is, your attention will shape your reality whether you control it or not. So the question becomes, will you let the world decide where your attention goes, or will you choose it yourself? Because in the end, what you pay attention to becomes your life. The paradox of simplicity. Simplicity is often praised as the key to happiness. We romanticize it, the idea of living with less, slowing down, and focusing only on what truly matters. We imagine a life free from clutter, noise, and unnecessary complexity, believing that once we strip away the excess, we'll finally feel peace. But here's the paradox. While simplicity can bring clarity and calm, achieving it is often far more complicated than we think. And in some cases, the pursuit of simplicity can become just another source of stress and obsession. At its heart, simplicity is about reducing the unnecessary so the essential can stand out. It's about creating space, physical, mental, emotional, for what genuinely adds value to your life. This might mean decluttering your home, setting boundaries on your time, or removing toxic relationships. In theory, it sounds easy. Just get rid of what doesn't serve you, but life is rarely that straightforward. What we consider unnecessary is often tied to our identity, our past, or our fears about the future. Letting go of things, even ones we don't use, can stir up unexpected feelings of loss or anxiety. The paradox deepens when simplicity becomes a project in itself. People chase minimalism the way others chase luxury, obsessing over having the right number of possessions, the perfect empty spaces, the most efficient routines. In doing so, they turn simplicity into another form of complexity. The moment you start stressing over whether your life is simple enough, you've already drifted away from the peace you were trying to create. There's also the reality that life itself is complex, and no amount of minimalism can change that. Relationships, ambitions, responsibilities, they all carry layers that can't be neatly organized or stripped away. True simplicity isn't about erasing complexity, but about learning to navigate it with intention. It's about knowing what to hold on to, what to release, and what to simply accept as part of the human experience. On a deeper level, the paradox of simplicity challenges our cultural conditioning. We live in a world that equates more with better, more money, more possessions, more options, more achievements. Choosing simplicity can feel like swimming against the current, especially when people around you measure success by accumulation. It takes strength to value depth over breadth, meaning over quantity. And yet, even as we strip away the excess, we must avoid turning simplicity into a competition or a performance. Simplicity in thought is another layer of the paradox. Clear thinking requires stripping away mental noise, assumptions, fears, and unnecessary complexity in decision-making. But simplifying your mind often involves facing the truths you've been avoiding. It's not always calm or pretty. Sometimes the path to a simpler mind is paved with difficult realizations, uncomfortable conversations, and the dismantling of old beliefs. The beauty of simplicity is that it can make life feel lighter, more breathable. But it's not a one-time achievement, it's a constant practice. Life will keep adding new layers, new demands, new distractions. Choosing simplicity means continuously asking, does this truly matter? Does this truly add value? And sometimes the answer isn't about removing something, but about seeing it differently. In the end, the paradox of simplicity teaches that simplicity is not about having less of everything. It's about having more of what matters. It's about clarity, not emptiness. And when done with intention rather than obsession, simplicity doesn't just make life quieter, it makes it deeper. But you have to remember, the moment your pursuit of simplicity starts making your life more complicated, you've already stepped away from it. The paradox of memory. Memory is one of the most fascinating and deceptive functions of the human mind. We like to think of it as a mental archive, a safe place where our experiences are stored exactly as they happened, ready to be replayed whenever we wish. We believe that memories are solid, unchanging proof of our past. But here's the paradox. Memory is not a perfect recording. It's a living, shifting, and deeply subjective story. Every time we recall an event, we don't simply retrieve it, we rewrite it. And over time, the more we remember something, the more it can change. On the surface, this seems impossible. How could the act of remembering alter the memory itself? But neuroscience has shown that each recall reactivates the neural pathways connected to that memory, making them susceptible to influence from our current emotions, beliefs, and surroundings. When you remember your childhood, you're not watching a perfect replay. You're blending the original experience with years of interpretations, assumptions, and even borrowed details from other people's stories. This means your most cherished memories may be as much imagination as they are fact. The paradox deepens when we realize that our memories shape our identity, even though they are unreliable. Who you believe yourself to be is largely based on the story you tell about your past. Yet that story is constantly being edited. The successes you remember may inspire confidence, but the failures you've exaggerated in your mind may feed self-doubt. The moments you've forgotten entirely may have been pivotal, yet their absence leaves no trace in the narrative you live by. Memory also plays tricks in moments of high emotion. Traumatic experiences can sear certain details into your mind with painful clarity, while other parts vanish into blankness, a defense mechanism to protect you from overwhelm. Joyful moments can feel brighter and more perfect than they actually were, because your brain selectively emphasizes the positive when revisiting them. Over time, the emotional lens through which you recall an event can become more powerful than the event itself. Then there's the strange reality that forgetting is just as essential as remembering. Without the ability to forget, our minds would be overwhelmed with constant, vivid detail from every moment we've lived. Forgetting allows us to move forward, to make space for new experiences. But this necessity creates its own tension. The people and places that once defined us inevitably fade, sometimes before we're ready to let them go. The paradox of memory also emerges in relationships. Two people can share the same experience, yet remember it in completely different ways. Each memory is filtered through personal perspective, emotional state, and selective attention at the time. This is why old friends or family members can argue over what really happened. Both are telling the truth as they remember it, yet both accounts can be wildly different. Perhaps the most haunting part of this paradox is that the memories we cling to as unshakable truths may be the least accurate. Psychological studies have shown that people often feel most certain about memories that are, in fact, false, a phenomenon known as false memory formation. Your mind can be convinced of an event that never happened, complete with sensory detail and emotional weight, simply because the story fits into the larger narrative you believe about your life. In the end, the paradox of memory teaches us humility. It reminds us that the past we think we know is not a fixed truth, but a flexible, evolving story. This doesn't mean memories are meaningless. Far from it. They give our lives texture, connection, and meaning. But it does mean we must hold them gently, knowing that they are as much a reflection of who we are now as who we were then. Because the truth is, memory is not about preserving the past perfectly. It's about helping us navigate the present. And in that sense, its imperfections are not flaws. They are part of what makes it human. The paradox of tolerance. Tolerance is often hailed as one of the highest virtues in a civilized society, the ability to respect and accept differences in beliefs, lifestyles, and values without hostility or judgment. We are told that tolerance fosters harmony, builds bridges between opposing perspectives, and creates the conditions for peace. On the surface, this sounds like an unquestionable good. But here's the paradox. A society that tolerates everything, including the intolerant, risks destroying itself. Too much tolerance can allow the very forces that oppose it to grow strong enough to silence it entirely. This idea, famously articulated by philosopher Karl Popper, forces us to face an uncomfortable truth. Tolerance must have boundaries. If we extend it without limit, even to those who actively work to suppress the rights and freedoms of others, we hand them the freedom to dismantle tolerance itself. The very openness that defines a tolerant society becomes the tool by which it is undone. This is the core of the paradox. To preserve tolerance, we must sometimes refuse to tolerate certain things. At first, this feels contradictory. How can you stand for tolerance while denying someone's viewpoint a platform? But the distinction lies in intent and consequence. Healthy tolerance makes room for disagreement, for uncomfortable conversations, and for diverse ways of living, as long as those differences do not actively strip away the dignity, safety, or rights of others. When a belief system's goal is to eliminate diversity, silence opposition, or enforce dominance, it is not a candidate for tolerance, it is a threat to it. The paradox deepens on a personal level. In our own lives, we often pride ourselves on being open-minded, believing it makes us more enlightened or morally superior. But unchecked open-mindedness can lead to enabling harmful behavior. We might allow toxic people to remain in our lives in the name of being understanding, or we might excuse repeated betrayals because we want to appear forgiving. In these cases, our tolerance doesn't uplift us. It erodes our boundaries. History offers countless examples of the danger in misapplied tolerance. Movements that began with calls for open dialogue and freedom have, in some cases, been overtaken by intolerant forces who exploited that freedom to impose rigid control. From authoritarian regimes rising through democratic systems to extremist groups using free speech protections to spread hatred, the lesson is clear. Tolerance without discernment can be a gateway to oppression. There's also a subtle emotional dimension to this paradox. Many people fear that setting limits on tolerance makes them close-minded or judgmental. But boundaries are not the enemy of compassion. They are its protector. Just as a healthy immune system fights off harmful intrusions to preserve the body, a healthy society must resist destructive ideologies to preserve its freedom. The paradox of tolerance also challenges the simplistic notion that all opinions are equally valid. While everyone has the right to an opinion, not all opinions are equally grounded in truth, empathy, or a respect for human dignity. Some opinions, particularly those rooted in bigotry or the denial of basic rights, are not just differences in perspective. They are direct attacks on the very foundation of tolerance. Treating them as harmless, alternate views ignores their capacity to cause real harm. On an interpersonal level, this paradox asks us to be clear about what we will and will not accept. You can respect someone's humanity without accepting behavior that dehumanizes others. You can love someone while refusing to condone their prejudices. This is not hypocrisy. It is the only way tolerance can survive without becoming self-destructive. Ultimately, the paradox of tolerance forces us to embrace a hard truth. Tolerance is not the absence of judgment, but the presence of discernment. It's not about making space for everything, but about protecting the space where differences can exist without fear. And that means drawing a firm line against those who would erase that space entirely. Because in the end, tolerance is a garden. It thrives when it's open to diverse seeds, different colors, and unexpected growth. But if you let weeds of intolerance take root unchecked, they will choke out every other living thing. And so to protect the beauty of the garden, you sometimes have to pull the weeds, not because you hate growth, but because you love it too much to let it die. The paradox of time travel. Time travel has fascinated human imagination for centuries. From ancient myths to modern science fiction, the idea of stepping outside the linear flow of time has been both thrilling and terrifying. We imagine visiting the past to witness history firsthand, or leaping into the future to see how our story unfolds. But here's the paradox. The very act of traveling through time could destroy the reality you're trying to explore. Change a single moment, and you risk unraveling the chain of events that made that moment, and you, possible. The most famous illustration of this is the grandfather paradox. If you travel back in time and prevent your grandparents from meeting, you would never be born. But if you were never born, how could you have traveled back in time to stop them? This loop of cause and effect creates a logical impossibility. It suggests that some events must be fixed, untouchable, no matter how much you might want to alter them. And yet, the very thought of having access to the past tempts us with the belief that we could change it. The paradox deepens when you consider the butterfly effect. The idea that tiny changes in the past can have massive consequences in the future. Step on a single insect millions of years ago, and you might erase entire species from existence. Say one different word to someone decades ago, and you could redirect the course of their life and the lives of everyone they affect. This raises a haunting question. If you could go back, would you dare to touch anything? But time travel paradoxes aren't limited to the past. Traveling into the future creates its own strange dilemmas. Imagine you leap forward 100 years and see the outcome of your life, your successes, your failures, the day and manner of your death. When you return to your own time, can you live the same way knowing what's ahead? Or will every choice you make now be an attempt to either reach or avoid the future you saw? In trying to escape it, you might create it. Theoretical physics offers even more layers to the paradox. Einstein's theory of relativity allows for the possibility of time dilation. Moving at speeds close to light can slow your experience of time relative to others. In a sense, this is a form of time travel, but without the neat ability to pick a moment and land in it. Other theories propose wormholes or closed time-like curves as pathways to different points in time. Yet, almost every serious model runs into the same problem: paradoxes that break the logic of causality, the fundamental arrow that keeps the universe coherent. Then there's the unsettling possibility of multiple timelines. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that if you change the past, you don't overwrite your original timeline. You simply create a new one, branching off in a different direction. This would mean there's no way to fix your own past, only to create alternate realities that you can never fully control. But this also raises a disturbing question. If infinite versions of reality already exist, what does that say about the meaning of choice, responsibility, or fate? On an emotional level, the paradox of time travel cuts deep. If you could visit the past, could you resist the temptation to see lost loved ones again, to say what you never said, to undo the regrets that haunt you? But in doing so, you might erase the very path that shaped you. Even your pain, as unbearable as it may be, is part of the intricate web that made you who you are today. Remove one thread, and the whole design might collapse into something unrecognizable. Time travel also forces us to confront a truth we often avoid. We are already time travelers, every moment. Can we move forward through time at the same pace, carrying the past in our minds and projecting the future in our imaginations? We can't alter the events we've lived, but we can change the way we remember them and the meaning we give them. And we can't leap ahead to the future, but every choice we make now is a step toward shaping it. The paradox of time travel reminds us that perhaps the reason we're so obsessed with bending time is because we struggle to accept its limits. We want to control it, master it, escape it. Yet it's the very linear, irreversible nature of time that gives life its urgency and meaning. If we could loop back endlessly, if we could undo every mistake, there would be no true stakes, no finality, no reason to act now. In the end, maybe the most profound form of time travel is not in machines or wormholes, but in presence, truly inhabiting the moment you're in, knowing you'll never stand in this exact second again. Because the truth is, the past is untouchable, the future is unwritten, and the only time you can actually touch is now. The observer effect paradox. The observer effect is one of the strangest and most unsettling ideas in both science and philosophy. At its core, it's the claim that the act of observing something can change what is being observed. In physics, it's often explained through quantum experiments. But the paradox runs far deeper than science labs. It challenges the very way we think about reality, suggesting that the world we see is never entirely separate from the act of seeing it. And here's the paradox. In trying to observe reality as it truly is, we inevitably alter it, meaning we may never know what it was before we looked. In quantum mechanics, this paradox is famously illustrated by the double-slit experiment. When particles like electrons or photons are fired at a barrier with two slits, they form an interference pattern on the other side, behaving like waves that pass through both slits at once. But when we try to measure which slit the particle goes through, the interference pattern disappears, and the particles behave like solid objects, going through only one slit. The very act of measurement, of observation, changes the outcome. This raises the unsettling possibility that particles exist in a cloud of probabilities until they are observed, at which point they collapse into a definite state. But the paradox doesn't stop in physics. In everyday life, the observer effect plays out in psychology, sociology, and even self-awareness. Think about how people behave differently when they know they're being watched, a phenomenon known as the Hawthorne effect. Workers may be more productive under surveillance, athletes may perform differently when a crowd is watching, and even children act differently when a parent is in the room. The presence of an observer doesn't just record reality, it shapes it. On a personal level, the paradox gets even more intimate. The moment you turn your attention inward, and observe yourself, your thoughts, feelings, or behavior, you change them. Self-consciousness can make you stumble during a speech you've practiced perfectly, or cause you to overthink actions that are normally effortless. You're not just living your life. You're living while also being aware of yourself living, and that awareness bends the experience itself. Philosophers have wrestled with the implications for centuries. If reality changes when observed, what does that say about reality when it's not observed? Does the moon exist when no one is looking at it? Einstein famously rejected the idea that the universe needs an observer to exist, insisting, "I like to think the moon is there even if I am not looking at it." But quantum mechanics has never given us a fully satisfying answer to the question. The paradox deepens further when we consider that we can never truly observe something without influencing it in some way. Even if you try to just watch, your mind interprets, filters, and labels what it sees. Observation is never passive. It's active, colored by perspective, expectation, and prior experience. This means that reality as we perceive it is always, in some way, a co-creation between the world out there and the observer in here. In relationships, the observer effect can cause subtle distortions. When you watch someone closely, out of love, suspicion, or curiosity, you may unintentionally cause them to act differently than they would otherwise. This can lead to misunderstandings, because you're no longer seeing their natural behavior, but their behavior under observation. Similarly, when you feel observed, whether by a partner, a boss, or society at large, you may change your behavior to fit what you believe is expected of you, often without realizing it. There's also a haunting, existential layer to this paradox. If every observation changes reality, then every memory is not just a record but a transformation. Each time you recall a moment, you alter it slightly in your mind, reshaping it with the lens of who you are now. Over years, those shifts accumulate, and the past you remember may be very different from the past that actually happened, if such a past could even be said to exist independently of your remembering it. Some interpretations of the observer effect in physics, particularly those influenced by the many worlds interpretation, suggest that all possible outcomes happen, but we only experience the one that observation locks in. This would mean that every choice, every moment of attention, splits reality into countless branches, most of which we'll never see. If true, the observer effect isn't just about changing outcomes, it's about deciding which universe you end up in. The deeper truth behind the observer effect paradox is that there may be no such thing as a purely objective perspective. Whether we are scientists measuring subatomic particles, friends trying to understand each other, or individuals trying to see ourselves clearly, we are always part of the thing we are observing. We can never fully stand outside of reality and watch it untouched, because our presence, physical, mental, or emotional, changes the scene. And maybe that's the most unsettling and liberating part of all. You are not just a passive witness to life, but an active participant in shaping it. Every glance, every question, every moment of attention nudges reality in some direction. You're not simply looking at the world, you're helping create the version of it you will remember and live in, which means that how you choose to look matters more than you might ever realize. The paradox of security is something almost every human being seeks, a sense of safety, stability, and protection from harm. We strive for it in countless ways, locking our doors at night, saving money for emergencies, building stable careers, surrounding ourselves with people we trust, and creating systems to guard against uncertainty. On the surface, the pursuit of security seems unquestionably wise. But here's the paradox. The more we try to make life perfectly secure, the more we may actually become fragile, dependent, and vulnerable. At its core, security is an illusion of control over an unpredictable world. We like to believe that if we plan carefully enough, protect ourselves thoroughly enough, and anticipate every possible threat, we can keep chaos at bay. But life doesn't work that way. Storms still hit, economies still crash, relationships still change. The more tightly we cling to the idea of perfect safety, the more we suffer when the inevitable disruptions arrive. Instead of making us unshakable, the obsessive pursuit of security can make us brittle. History offers countless examples. Civilizations have built towering walls, intricate defense systems, and stockpiles of resources, only to fall to unexpected threats they never anticipated. Individuals have locked away their savings, avoided risks, and played life as safely as possible, only to watch opportunity pass them by, leaving them unfulfilled. The paradox here is that absolute security is both impossible and, in some cases, undesirable. Without some degree of uncertainty, we lose the very challenges and risks that make life meaningful and help us grow. There's also the psychological layer. People who seek extreme security often end up living in constant anxiety, scanning for threats that might never come. They mistake vigilance for safety, not realizing that this state of hyper-awareness keeps them trapped in a stress loop. Ironically, in trying to avoid danger, they spend much of their lives feeling unsafe. True security isn't found in eliminating every threat. It's in cultivating the ability to face threats when they come. On a personal level, relationships provide one of the clearest examples of this paradox. We want the security of love, of knowing someone will be there for us no matter what. But if we cling too tightly, demanding constant reassurance or controlling their freedom to prevent loss, we often create the very instability we feared. Real security in love doesn't come from locking someone in. It comes from mutual trust, respect, and the freedom to choose each other again and again. Societally, the paradox becomes even more complicated. Nations that prioritize extreme security sometimes restrict freedoms in the name of safety. Surveillance increases, rules tighten, and public life becomes more controlled. People may initially accept these measures, believing they're necessary to protect against danger. But over time, a culture of fear can take root, where the pursuit of safety erodes the very freedoms and openness that make life worth protecting in the first place. Financial security is another area where this paradox plays out. Saving money is wise, but hoarding wealth out of fear of loss can prevent people from investing in opportunities that could improve their lives. Likewise, avoiding all financial risks can sometimes be the riskiest move of all. Inflation, unforeseen expenses, or sudden emergencies can erode carefully guarded resources faster than expected. Real security in finance often requires a balance, protecting yourself while still taking calculated risks that allow for growth. There's also the danger of letting security become the ultimate goal, overshadowing other values like curiosity, adventure, and personal evolution. A life built solely on avoiding danger may be technically safe, but it's often stagnant. Growth requires discomfort. Courage requires stepping into uncertainty. Too much security can be a kind of prison, keeping you safe but unfulfilled. From a deeper philosophical perspective, the paradox of security forces us to confront the fact that nothing in life is ever truly guaranteed. We are mortal beings living in an ever-changing world, and no wall, vault, or plan can protect us from every outcome. The more we try to deny this truth, the more fragile we become when reality forces us to face it. But when we accept uncertainty as part of life, we paradoxically feel more secure, because our sense of stability is no longer dependent on circumstances being perfect. True security is not about building an unbreakable shell. It's about strengthening the core within yourself, so that no matter what happens, you can adapt, endure, and rebuild. It's the kind of confidence that doesn't come from knowing you'll never fall, but from knowing you can get up every time you do. That's the security that can't be stolen, because it lives in you, not in the fragile structures you've built around you. In the end, the paradox of security teaches us this. Chasing absolute safety can make us less safe, while embracing a little uncertainty can make us far stronger. Security isn't the absence of danger, it's the presence of resilience, and the safest place you can ever stand is in the space where you are ready for anything. The paradox of effort is often framed as the golden key to achievement. The more you put in, the more you get out. We grow up hearing phrases like, "hard work pays off," and "you get what you work for." And in many ways, that's true. Consistent effort is essential to mastering skills, reaching goals, and building the life you want. But here's the paradox. There are moments when the harder you try, the further you get from what you want. Sometimes the very intensity of your effort becomes the obstacle that blocks the outcome you're chasing. You can see this most clearly in situations where control matters less than we think. Take sleep, for example. The harder you try to fall asleep, the more alert and restless you become. The very act of putting effort into making yourself sleep keeps your body and mind too active for rest. Or consider creativity. Forcing yourself to come up with an idea under extreme pressure often results in bland, uninspired work, while your best ideas tend to arrive in moments of relaxation, daydreaming, or distraction. In these cases, pushing harder is counterproductive, and loosening your grip gets you closer to the goal. The paradox of effort also shows up in relationships. The more desperately you try to make someone like you, overthinking every word, forcing every interaction, the more unnatural and strained the connection becomes. True connection flows best when you're present, not when you're performing. The same applies to attraction, friendship, and trust. Push too hard, and you risk suffocating the very bond you're trying to strengthen. In sports and performance, athletes experience this paradox constantly. A runner who is too tense burns energy faster and runs slower. A musician who overthinks every note loses the natural rhythm and emotion of the music. In martial arts, a fighter who tries to force every move quickly tires out and becomes predictable, while a relaxed, adaptive fighter responds fluidly and effectively. Effort is essential, but it must be balanced with ease, a concept often summed up as effortless effort, or Wu-Wei in Taoist philosophy, where action flows without resistance. On a psychological level, the paradox deepens. Effort can create pressure, and pressure can create anxiety. And anxiety often sabotages performance. Think about times you've been nervous during a test or a job interview. You studied, prepared, rehearsed, but in the moment, the sheer effort of trying to be perfect made your mind go blank, or your words stumble. The more you pushed, the worse it got. In these moments, the key isn't to try harder, but to trust yourself enough to let go. This paradox also applies to personal growth. Many people throw themselves into self-improvement, reading every book, trying every habit, filling every hour with productivity. But when growth becomes an obsessive project, it often leads to burnout, frustration, and a constant feeling of not being good enough. True transformation doesn't happen because you strain every muscle of your willpower. It happens because you align your effort with patience, consistency, and self-compassion. Even in problem-solving, there's a strange truth. When you focus too intensely on a solution, your mind can get stuck in a loop, missing the obvious answer right in front of you. But when you step away, take a walk, or do something unrelated, the answer often appears naturally. It's as if the mind works best when we stop strangling it with overexertion. The paradox becomes even more complex when we realize that in some areas of life, less effort is not laziness, it's strategy. A person who spends 10 hours grinding at a problem without rest may accomplish less than someone who works in focused bursts with periods of recovery. Efficiency, adaptability, and timing often matter more than raw hours of labor. The person who knows when to push and when to pause will often surpass the one who only knows how to push. In relationships with ourselves, this paradox can be a deep source of suffering. The harder we try to force ourselves into happiness, the more elusive it becomes. Joy, meaning, and peace of mind don't respond well to brute force. They come more readily when we create the right conditions, gratitude, curiosity, openness, and allow them to arise naturally. The paradox of effort doesn't mean effort is useless. In fact, it's a reminder that effort is most powerful when it's directed with wisdom. The key is knowing when to drive forward and when to ease off the gas. Life isn't a machine where more input always equals more output. It's a living process where timing, balance, and rhythm often matter more than sheer intensity. Ultimately, the lesson is this: you can't strangle your way into success, peace, or love. Sometimes trying less is what allows you to achieve more. Sometimes the breakthrough comes when you stop forcing it and let things flow. And the great irony, reaching that place of effortless effort often takes a lot of effort to learn. The paradox of wealth. Wealth is one of humanity's oldest and most persistent obsessions. From the earliest days of trade and gold coins to modern financial empires and digital currencies, people have chased wealth, believing it will solve their problems, secure their futures, and grant them freedom. And there is truth in that belief. Money can open doors, buy comfort, and protect against certain hardships. But here's the paradox. The more wealth you have, the more it can own you. The more you accumulate in search of freedom, the more you may find yourself trapped by the very thing you thought would set you free. On the surface, wealth seems like the ultimate solution. With enough money you can buy safety, choose your own schedule, and say no to things you don't want to do. But many who acquire great wealth discover an unexpected reality. Instead of feeling liberated, they become weighed down by anxiety, responsibility, and fear of loss. The same fortune that promised peace of mind now demands constant attention to protect it. You don't just own wealth, you manage it, guard it, and sometimes even live in service to it. One of the most common traps of wealth is the shifting baseline of desire. At first, gaining more feels thrilling. You get a bigger house, a better car, more luxurious vacations. But over time, what was once exciting becomes normal, and your sense of satisfaction resets. This is known as the hedonic treadmill. No matter how much you get, you quickly adapt, and need even more to feel the same rush of happiness. The paradox is that chasing more can eventually make you feel like you never have enough, even when you have more than almost anyone else. There's also the burden of preservation. The wealthier you are, the more you have to lose, and the more energy you might spend trying to protect it. People with great fortunes often live with a constant background fear of bad investments, legal disputes, economic downturns, or even being exploited by those around them. What was supposed to bring peace instead breeds vigilance and mistrust. The castle you build for safety can become a prison you never leave. Even relationships can become complicated under this paradox. When you have significant wealth, it can be difficult to know if people value you or your resources. Friendships, partnerships, even family bonds can become clouded by suspicion or unspoken expectations. Wealth can open the door to new circles, but it can also isolate you, creating a gap between your experience and the lives of most people around you. Then there's the paradox of purpose. Many people work hard for decades, believing that wealth will finally allow them to stop working and start living. But once they achieve it, they sometimes find themselves adrift. Without the struggle and striving that once gave life meaning, their days can feel empty. In this way, wealth can rob you of the very hunger and challenge that made life engaging. Some respond by chasing even more wealth, not because they need it, but because the pursuit itself has become their identity, an endless game with no finish line. Philosophically, the paradox of wealth raises deeper questions about what we actually want. Do we want money, or do we want what we believe money will give us? Security, respect, influence, freedom, joy? If it's the latter, then wealth is only one possible path, and sometimes not even the most effective one. There are wealthy people who are deeply unhappy, and people of modest means who live rich, meaningful, and joyful lives. This doesn't mean wealth is bad, but it does mean it is not the guaranteed key to fulfillment. There's also the paradox of generosity. Many wealthy people discover that giving money away brings more satisfaction than keeping it, but they may also fear giving too much, worried they'll one day need it. Paradoxically, the more you have, the harder it can be to part with it, because you've tied your sense of safety to its presence. True generosity requires trust, in yourself, in others, and in life, and that trust can be harder to cultivate when you've been conditioned to guard your fortune at all costs. From a societal perspective, wealth concentration can lead to its own contradictions. Extreme wealth can grant individuals enormous influence, but if used selfishly, it can destabilize the very systems that allowed it to exist. A society with massive wealth gaps often becomes more unstable, which in turn threatens the security of the wealthy themselves. This is the larger-scale version of the paradox. Hoarding wealth for personal safety can ultimately make the world around you more dangerous. Perhaps the deepest truth of the paradox of wealth is that money is a tool, not a destination. It amplifies who you already are, generous or greedy, secure or insecure, purposeful or lost. If you are restless, fearful, or unfulfilled without money, you will likely be restless, fearful, and unfulfilled with it. Only now, with more resources to magnify those feelings. True wealth, then, is not measured solely by numbers in a bank account, but by the stability, peace, and purpose you can maintain regardless of fluctuations in fortune. It's the kind of wealth that cannot be stolen or devalued. Resilience, relationships, self-respect, creativity, and time. Paradoxically, the people who understand this often end up handling financial wealth more wisely because they are not enslaved by it. In the end, the paradox of wealth teaches us this: money can buy comfort, security, and opportunity, but it cannot buy the inner freedom to enjoy them. If you master money, it can serve you well. If money masters you, no amount will ever be enough. The richest life is not the one with the most possessions, but the one where you can look at what you have, however much or little, and feel, without fear of loss, that it is already enough.